One question I have is under restoration and protection of natural resources, restore frog pond. What is that?
That's a really good question, and I think it has to do with if it's something that's included in a downtown Apalachicola.com Main Street plan. No, actually, the Carabel. It's Carabel. Okay, so I believe when you're going through Carabel, headed east, there's a park on the right. Yeah, that pond right behind the park with the playground. I believe that's the frog pond. But that came from the Carabel Waterfront Vision Plan.
Well, that's first time I heard it called a frog pond. It's sand
Well, they wanted to
park.
put them things that, and the city commission didn't want them to do.
Okay, I'm just wondering,
Old sands field.
I know
So-
a lot of ponds around, but I've never heard of one called frog pond. I was just trying to figure out what the location was and what the intention was.
So specifically, during the RAC meeting, there were a number of significant comments that some of this
You
city.
have to hold your hand, we can see it.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
For the board, let you know where the frog pond is. It's an intertidal,
You're gonna have to come forward, speak your name for the record.
sorry.
Thank you for clarifying.
Leslie Cox, I live in Carabel, I'm on the Waterfront Partnership. That's probably one of our suggestions. It's been in the planning for Carabel for a long time because it's one of the very few intertidal ponds that we have in Franklin County and actually in this whole Big Bend area. It's desperately in need of some restoration. Is wading birds stopover. It's used regularly by wading birds on their migration tours. So and we just call it the frog pond. It's been always called the frog pond by Carabel residents. So it's on 30A. in
Okay,
Carabel.
now I know what you're talking
Right,
about. I didn't know
exactly.
that was the frog pond. You're talking about down on the left, the frog pond.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. On the left, on 30A, intertidal pond.
Oh,
Okay,
that's saltwater
Sand
pond.
That's Moody's old place.
Yeah.
okay, I
We
don't
call-
know what
we
you're
don't call it
talking
frog
about.
pond, we call it saltwater pond.
The
Okay.
saltwater pond, yes,
Yeah.
that's what it is.
So you're not talking about the pond there by the park?
No, some
No.
comes up
But he's
after.
talking about off
Okay, okay.
next to Lucky Strike down there, Smoky.
Okay,
It's a cover
We call
comes up,
Lucky
it's a
Strike.
cover comes up under the C30 and it goes over and fills it up.
I
Okay.
thought it was the
I
frog
was just-
pond with that in Carabel.
that's just one thing I looked at real quick, and I said, restore frog pond, I didn't know what it was referring to.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification on that. That was, I did not personally review that plan. I believe that was reviewed by Stella, so I apologize for not knowing exactly what that one was. Any other questions?
Still thumbing through here.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board members? Looks like to me we're moving forward on that.
Yeah, again, it's supposed to be
It's pretty broad, and that's the way we wanted it.
broad and inclusive.
So y'all
That's
done a
the
good
intent.
job on that one.
Okay, well, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amy Newbern, again from the UWF Haas Center. And then following her, we've got Brian Griffith here to say a few words.
Okay.
Good morning. I just wanted to introduce a report to you. We created a 49-page market analysis for Dewberry for Franklin County, and it's a pretty dense report with 4 sections, so I just wanted to go over what you might expect to be able to take from that. So it's divided into 4 sections, starting with a regional demographic profile. Yes.
Okay, I just want the guys to see which one. If you scroll down, it starts with it.
Let's see here.
Go on. There. Go.
Marketing
All
analysis,
the way
right?
down?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all the way down.
I just want to make it a with you.
Yeah.
Okay, I got
Okay.
it. I got it. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, great. So for the first section, That will go into details about both Franklin County as well as Carabel, East Point, Apalachicola, and then compare that to the state of Florida. And it'll cover demographic conditions as far as education, income, poverty rates, about what's happening now as well as what's projected in a 5-year period. The next moves into an industry profile, and you'll look at that for Franklin County and then the 3-county and 5-county area. And it shows you not just what these major areas are, but also the size of them and their earnings, average earnings. So it's really to show you what's actually happening right now. The third goes down to a smaller level, so not just industry, but what actual occupations are the most frequent in the Franklin County, 3-county, and 5-county area. This is pretty useful because it also shows you an average hourly rate as well as the education level there. There are additional information as far as what kind of gaps might you expect as far as what your educational attainment is happening over the next 10 years, as well as what is happening in your employment. So once you move from industry, the fourth and final section is just a broad picture of the economy of Franklin County. So it'll tell you about your growing and declining industries, how it's doing compared to other small towns, and so should hopefully be able to give you all of this information in a context. So this is what we know is actually happening, and this is where you're currently succeeding and where you might be struggling if nothing changes. So without going into the nitty-gritty details, which of 49 pages, there is a lot of information in that. I hope that gives you a broad idea of what you might be able to expect from the report. Are there any questions or thoughts that I could answer?
There's a lot of information there to
Yes, there is.
read through and comprehend.
Yes.
Any questions from the board? I will take the time to sit down and read through this report,
You
and
got to read it first.
maybe in the future we'll have some comments and
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman,
ask for direction too.
what's the 3 counties versus
Um,
the 5? What counties? is
Let
it?
me make sure before I speak out of
I think
turn.
I know, but I could be wrong.
Gulf and Wakulla with Franklin. Okay. Well, if you guys have any other questions, then feel free to reach out to me directly as well. Thank you.
Is your number on this report, or how do we reach out to you?
I am not sure if my direct contact information is, but my email is aweber.
I'll give you my card, you can send me the time.
Okay.
That way he'll have the contact.
Yeah, that would be fine. So anytime you need clarification, I would be happy to answer those.
We appreciate you coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I just want to take a minute of your time to reflect a little bit on what this part of the process has brought you and what you can expect next going down the road. So in the methodology that we've proposed and used here, there's a couple of things that may go by the wayside that you're not recognizing, and I want to make sure we don't let that happen. When you do the needs assessment in the general context that it is done, has been performed in these counties, it gives you an up-to-date reflection, especially when you're reviewing over 100 resources. It gives you an up-to-date reflection and synthesis about what are the underlying needs, just as the statement would portend to imply. And the currency of that, hence being dated, if you will, 12/5, relative to either CDBG grant operations going forward, the market analysis that was just done, which is current to 12/5, will give you a tremendous resource for the things not only within Restore but outside of Restore. You would be generally wanting this kind of material to help reinforce the statements of qualification, the statements of particular need in subcategory areas, or that type of thing. So it was intentionally designed to allow the Restore structure not only to feed itself as to how you would get to the kind of projects you would select, but also to give you a pathway outside of that towards other monies that are available through the federal and state grant programs. So it's, I hope you recognize that. Maybe did, maybe didn't. I just want to point that out. So as you point out, as you read the 49 pages, that kind of profile, you would literally have to go out and commission to have done. And now you have it on file, and it'll be good for a very long time as you look forward to how to exploit that. Now let's talk a little bit about how to exploit that. So as consultants, we are consultants. That doesn't mean that all of our consult is taken, but we're consultants nonetheless. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you at this point in time that the next step, so you have what would be, I don't want to be quip, but you have a bucket list. There's a lot going on in this county. There's a lot going on in every county. There's a lot going on in this county. Much more demand than you have money in Restore to meet the grade on. You know that only too good and well. The steps going forward are to recognize, obviously, and to make those decisions about where to best apply yourself with this resource. And that will move next into the selection criteria. Because by any other definition, selection criteria is the filter upon which you're going to put a lens on those needs, right? You know, what is or are the most important aspects of where to land the biggest bang for the buck for this particular resource? And you know, that is going to, we're looking forward to moving into that quickly with you because the other thing about establishing, and it's not easy, but absolutely essential, establishing the selection criteria establishes an ideology and a direction of the board. And it is a screening structure, and it's going to leave, it's going to leave some on the roadside. And you just have to be prepared to do that. And without it, we'd just be simply cycling these projects. So that's just a vision of the future. But I also want to talk to, again, going back to the needs assessment and the other materials that were presented from UWF. This is also that time to not only look at from the standpoint of where can you get the biggest bang for the buck, but for multiple reasons why it's where you can get the biggest bang for the buck. What I mean by that is, as you look at some of the challenges that your community would put you to consider spending this money on, be careful. Because as you start to partition those opportunities, you really need somebody to glean through outside the Restore structure where those other monies are available. There are a lot of small project monies out there through a lot of grant programs. Is that the best place to use this money? I would submit to you probably not. Because, again, the Restore money is so unique in the fact that it has no matching requirement and can be used across the spectrum of economic or environmental projects. And the point is, like I said, this is an exercise that's going to be really critical because you're going to start to lay down a path and, and establish a pattern. And it's just going to be probably the most critical stage in the preparation to getting to the MYIP process. The other thing, as you know from the report in Orlando on the consortium meeting and moves ahead, it is very clear, and I know you've made a statement once before on this, but it's very clear with regard to the pressures that are being put on Treasury to consider, allowing large projects, multi-year projects for reimbursement. The capital reimbursement to come from the outlays, the annual outlays, meaning you could pre-bond for, lack of better terms, or other financing instruments. That's pretty significant. I'm going to tell you from my personal experience. I'm just going to be, again, brutally honest as your consultant. Personal experience is you don't want to look backwards on these resources and have had such. The term usually used in the industry is boutique projects that you can't even remember what they were 5 years from now, and they had no real effect. You want to really be cautious to have a legacy level effect, possibly can. And the last thing with regard, I wanted to tell you because it came up in subject, and I wasn't planning to address this, but you mentioned the possibility of obviously dealing with UDBRA consultants to determine whether you could do loan buy-down, and you absolutely cannot.
Okay.
You absolutely cannot. The Treasury would never, the Treasury guidelines absolutely clearly forbid it. So that you need to take your direction there. Now let's talk strategically about what your options are. Obviously, if you can't use the resource for that, but that is a dominant pressure or a dominant problem on the county, and at the same time there are other big projects or relatively significant, you buy down $700,000, pretty big, relatively significant efforts that you were going to undertake, but for the opportunity under Restore, if you're moving down those pathways, some people use the term offset wrong. If you were to challenge that project under restore and use the resources because it fits, and use the resources that you had already preliminarily set aside to move into that arena, not restore, then you could buy down that debt with the offsetting monies that you did not use. You understand what I'm saying?
No, you lost me.
Okay.
You lost me.
So let's just suppose, I'll just take it easy, relatively easy. Let's just suppose that for whatever reason you determine that, I'm just picking one. I mean, this doesn't mean it's your pick. That you were actually truly to embark on the Emergency Operations Center. And you were looking right now at financing sans restore as to how to do that. And an element, you realize that you're getting ready to take the community into either a set aside of your annual budget or maybe even another bond, God forbid, but whatever, you're going to embark on that project. But you realize now it's an eligible project within restore. And you've started down that path. And if you were to use that money from restore, you could take the resources that you were going to use from your general fund and buy down the debt. You see what I'm getting at?
I see.
So that's a relatively, that's just a one-for-one kind of scenario, but my point is on a much wider grid, when you see that matrix, you will see opportunities that come in there. Whether that plays to the final hand of the commission is the commission's determination. I just want to tell you that's how you can begin to skin that cat. Because in the final analysis, you have to pay the bond down, and you have this much resource in restore. So the combination of how you use those monies is a business plan. And it just needs to come out to be the best business plan.
You gotta be careful how you deal your cards.
You got to be careful how you deal with cards. That's right. Okay.
As you were talking earlier about the smaller projects and probably an advantageous way to use some of these restore funds as it pertains to smaller matching grants. And some of these projects are from the cities, NGOs, whatever. We're basically requiring them to come up with matching funds. So to say that it may not be advantageous for the county, it could be advantageous for NGOs, municipalities, whoever might apply to us for restore funds if it's a smaller project, for them to apply for the matching funds on the smaller scale that you're talking about.
I think we're talking about the same thing. I really do. So right now, for you to, two things I want to say in this regard. I really applaud the county to actually put a match requirement on your applicants, okay? Because you need to leverage this money, this or any other money you have. You just have direct access to this money. But if anyone is bringing that kind of match to the table, all right, they are already advantaged in one regard in being able to be eligible for monies that require matching funds in those grant programs. So that parsing out to get it right, the deal the right cards scenario that was mentioned earlier, is critical. Because you can look backwards and realize you spent a lot of money, but on what? And you spent money. You want to be careful that you don't spend money that should be careful how I use that term, but I'm going to be cautious that you don't spend money that, and frankly, in some regards, is probably pretty relatively easily gotten somewhere else.
I guess.
Okay.
And I've noticed also through the consortium and other places that a lot of these communities or counties are putting all the funds into one project because it's so cumbersome
And I'm going
to do a bunch of smaller projects.
And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. So you heard the young lady talk about the CDBG maze. Restore has quite a maze to it. An audit maze, a money management, accountability, responsibility, reporting structure that is pretty daunting, okay? And not to be dismissive of the fact that you have some resources in there with which to help pay for the ability to manage that, but it is still a task. And there have been many federal grant programs that, when looked on as how much administration it takes, haven't gone very well because some communities find it costs them more in administration than the effect of the project. Well, that changes in regard to, it obviously does, It changes if you are doing much larger project, the gauntlet is the same, much larger projects, lesser number of those incremental traps to run through each one of them. And I would, again, be remiss if I didn't tell you that generally when you have a resource of this nature and this size, you really also got to look at, the term would be critical mass. Be careful that you don't do projects that you can only get a portion of and never get to critical mass, and they're likely to fail in the end because they were not large enough. Did not do enough of it to make a difference. So that is where you're seeing some of the counties realize, in some areas I've been at this for years, it's this big, and I mean, who am I kidding? This is one of the biggest efforts that have the most impact for this county. I just need to go all in, right? Because I'm going to get to it at some point anyway if I'm doing my job. I've got a chance to have and then they have to look at the critical mass piece. Because the last thing you want to do is even have a big go all in, but not be all in enough, to bend the curve and get it done. But there is, most small counties, areas and enterprises like this are most disadvantaged by the inability to sustain, frankly, a large enough grant writing, managing community to know all the opportunities that are out there. And that's just real life. That's why you can obviously go in Hillsborough and go into Tampa and see that, they've got just floors and floors and floors, and they're managing all the grants, so they get all the time. They have people that do that. And that's what I'm saying. You got that other level down there, there is money available all the time through these other small grant programs. It's just a matter of whether you're positioning and you're playing to them. But this money, one time.
Right. And that's the reason we have a consultant
Yes.
to help guide us through this maze.
Going to give it a heck of a try.
And we have to understand as a board and as a community, there's a lot of needs here that we've never had money to try to address some of these needs. So there's going to be smaller projects, but each one of those smaller projects has to jump through this whole host of hoops.
Every
single
one
project.
of them.
Exactly, and we understand that.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to get you to understand too, and you probably already do, that we're so small and have such a diverse amount of issues that need to be addressed that we've never had funding available to address. That it's inevitable that there's going to be some smaller projects.
Oh, I have no doubt about that.
And hopefully as we jump through the hoops, you still have to jump through all those hoops, but it becomes less cumbersome as we move forward and we start jumping through these hoops, just as I was referring to her earlier about another grant of the same magnitude. All the expertise she's learning now, we could probably utilize in 2 years when we close this grant out, should the board decide to reapply and go back through this same thing. She'll have more knowledge as our consultant, and we're relying on you as our consultant to help get us through some of these things. I don't see really massive projects going on here, as you heard the board address earlier. We're not really looking at trying to go out and spend all the money that we have in this BP settlement, because we don't know what's happening in the future. None of us may be here, and there may be something arise that we can then go and do a project and have some funds available to do a project, such as our restoration of our bay and other things. So, I've always been an advocate for, just because we have money, don't spend it all. Save some for the future generations as problems arise for those people also, to address some of the issues of the county. And we do appreciate you coming here, and we do appreciate y'all being a part of our team and helping try to guide us through this and make everything work for the benefit of the community and the county as a whole.
Well, we hope you like the work thus far, and we've certainly enjoyed the opportunity to really get in.
And I understand the study that the Haas Center has done and how that relates to how we look at future projects and having the guidance and the statistical data.
Correct.
To help submit, this is a project that we're wanting to do, and then when you look at this study, there's indications here of this is things that we need to do.
Right.
And having that study will be very beneficial to us as we try to quantify some of these projects as they move forward.
Yeah, the demographic arrays will definitely help your CDBG program a lot.
Yeah, so it's very good information. Any questions of the commissioners too?
No, I just want to make one statement, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. I noticed on the synopsis that the consortium had at the meeting on Friday, that you look at one of the counties, I know you saw Commissioner Parrish like I did. One of the projects was $671 million project. There's no way that they're gonna have enough restore funds to do that project, so they're gonna be looking at other sources of revenue also. So that's gonna be very competitive out there. Those other sources of, monies for different projects is gonna be very competitive too, also.
It is, and another question that was brought up down there is sustainability of some of these projects. You know, I know that probably doesn't really apply to the Restore Pot One monies, but it is an issue.
Well,
But to-
here-
when
here-
you're doing projects, how do you sustain the project? We don't want to do a project and a year later it's over and the project just goes down because there's no sustainability aspect of that.
It is, well, you see it in real time, as do we, you know, operating to get the approvals through Treasury that we have for you. You know, the game is still being made up in real time. And it's a crossover between just managing the guidelines in the fashion that they are put out there, and it's playing a little bit further outside the lines to get interpretive as to whether they like your project or not. And one of those aspects is on the sustainability side. There is no sustainability requirement in the Restore structure that isn't, you know, that would stand the test. But here's the point, regardless, the fact that you bring it up and it's on the table. One of the greatest failures of projects in this area is the absence of understanding the long haul. And on your capital improvement projects or even some of your key environmental recovery projects, there is an O&M tab to be paid in perpetuity. And these things hunt many of these projects down, you know, 5, 10 years out. And I know that's not all of the lens of sustainability that they are referring to, but it's one of the key ones, because there have been many a CDBG project that has been undertaken that has been abysmal in mothballing. She was talking about what happens if the business folds, where the structure is mothballing. I will tell you this, on the federal side, they are looking very seriously at serious policy changes in those programs to come back and get their money back. And that's when the game gets real.
That's when it does get real.
That's when it gets real. So that's just, it's an elevated awareness now, but that's what you all do every day. But it's not a problem that they would elevate that awareness, because, you know, you move into something big and you guys need to ask that question. It's an in perpetuity O&M effort. So.
O&M, you're referring to operation and maintenance?
Yes, sir, I am.
Just to put that out there, so.
Yep, it is, there's nothing free on the back end of that.
And we do that when we're taking on additional county
Yeah.
parks or anything else. You have to understand that there's operation and maintenance involved in that.
But oddly, some people just forget that, and it hunts down the total revenue.
And, you know, I know there's not the sustainability aspect of the Restore Act, but we as a board have to be aware of that when we're looking at projects and projects to be approved, that, you know, is it a good project? Is it gonna be sustainable? You know, who's gonna bear the operation and maintenance of this? And make sure that we use the money wisely and
So then again, I don't mean to take up too much airtime here, but so I keyed on the economic side. One of the other aspects that is very current nationally, no matter, and I do not want to politicize this, I won't. It's just a matter of whether you are informed and affected, or you or anybody, any of your peer groups is informed or affected by any of the science. The other sustainability side is to pick on some recovery projects for which, let's just say, for example, just be honest, you either do or do not factor in relative sea level rise. If you do not, that's a choice. The fact of the matter is, much of that science would portend to say that would be a really bad oyster recovery area, because nothing supports its long-term efficacy of being, intact based on the science. Now, you are not forced to follow the best science. The best science reviews are actually asked for in the project details. But I mean, that's when other people are talking about sustainability, that's one aspect of it as well. Are you informed by the pressures and the stressors, where you have to look back at somebody and say, you know, I just don't feel comfortable that that is gonna be a viable investment. It's gonna look great years 1 and 2 and 3 and be a dust bowl in 6, 7, and 8. And that's the other aspect of it.
Do we do any other comments from the commission? We do appreciate you coming here this morning and can look to continue working with you and moving forward on this issue.
Thank you all so very much. I'm glad
Thank
the
you.
weather finally cleared up.
Yes, sir.